Well, a very good evening to you members and also members of the public. Thank you very much for joining us here at the Lichfield District Council in the Council Chamber here on the 5th of September 2022. And this meeting is being live streamed for the benefit of those people who aren't able to make this meeting but wish to view it remotely. So we welcome them and say a very good evening to those viewing remotely as well. Members, we start off with the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. I've had 3 councillors submit their apologies. They are Councillor Powell, Councillor Barnett, and Councillor Ray. As far as I know, there aren't any others, is that correct? So we have 3 apologies. Members, do we have any declarations of interest, please? Okay, well, that makes that item a lot easier, doesn't it? Thank you very much. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Now, normally we have a 4-week cycle, but this was a 5-week cycle because it was interrupted by, of course, the bank holiday last Monday. So you've all had a copy of those minutes circulated to you electronically. Members, are you all happy that they represent a true and correct record of the meeting which took place on the 1st of August here? Thank you very much. Thank you, Wendy. So those are signed. We now move on then to the whole purpose of this meeting, which is the planning applications, of which we have 2 this evening. The first one is 21/01661/FUL. It's 35 Little Aston Hall, Aldridge Road, Little Aston, Sutton Coldfield. And to take us through this application, I'm going to hand over to my planning officer sitting on my right-hand side, and this is Audrey Lewis. Is Audrey Lewis? Yes, that's right. So Audrey Lewis will take us through this application. So Audrey, when you're ready, if you'd like to read your report to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Can you hear me okay? Is that better? How about that? Okay, good. So this application is for demolition of 1 disused office building and erection of 1 detached dwelling at 35 Little Aston Hall. Slide 2. Sorry?
Number 35.
Oh, sorry, 35 Little Aston Hall. So on this slide, we have the red application line denoting the application site, which is located at the junction of Lakeside and is approximately 22 metres to the north of Grade 2 listed Little Aston Hall. The site is wholly within the Little Aston Conservation Area and the Little Aston Neighbourhood Plan Area. The site abuts the green belt to the west and south of the site. The site is surrounded by mature trees. There are 2 individually protected trees on the site and an area protection which covers a number of trees. There they are there. The existing site plan shows a large oak to the rear of the dwelling. The site is accessed via a private gated drive. Can you see my pointer on here or not? No. Can you? So there's a long drive, which is a private gated drive, and the site itself is currently occupied by a vacant single-storey office building and its associated car parking, which is there. It's not matching on here, is it? There is a wide variety of footprint of dwellings, design, scale and map. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Thank you. No, I can't. And Mike My mouse isn't matching the screen. That's better. Thank you.
You will see that.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So this is the office building itself. And we have the grade 2 listed building here. And we have one of the large 2-storey detached houses opposite, directly opposite. 1 to 6 Lakeside is here, which is a 4-storey apartment block. There's 3 of those blocks there to the right. Moving back to the south again, grade 2 listed hall. These are the garage blocks either side here, just to get everything into context. This is the fountain. And further south, there are some more 4-storey dwellings here. So the buildings range from the office building itself is 5 metres high. The garages are single-storey 5 metre. And the 2-storey houses here are 8 metres. 4-storey apartment blocks here are 11 metres to the right. Little Aston Hall itself is 13.5 metres sitting here. So the dominant building in the immediate area is the grade 2 listed Little Aston Hall, which has an overall width of some 36 metres, depth of 25 metres. Then in the 1980s, the Little Aston Hall site was redeveloped. The original hall was converted into 7 residential apartments, which retained its external appearance. They actually use the other 7 garages, which are located here. They're in use. In addition, 7 new modern style double blocks of 6 apartments were built in the grounds overlooking the lake. So you can see 3 of those there. So Lakeside also contains 8 large detached houses which are located along here. So this is number 1 to 6 Lakeside, the nearest dwelling, as you can see, which is the apartment blocks, which have side-facing windows, and also there are balconies here. Next to that apartment block is the actual office building, which is screened by the trees here. And this is just moving further to the right at the front of the existing office building, which you can see in photograph 3. And photograph 4 is the parking and hard surfacing in front of the office building, which is just to the right hand side of the actual building. And then this line of trees splits it off from the hall. So photograph 5, you can just get a glimpse through the trees of the parking area to the right of the site. There is the corner of the hall, just there. Photograph 5. Photograph 6 shows the edge of a rhododendron hedge, which has been mentioned on the comments. And this view is taken, photograph 7 is sitting at the side wall of the existing office building. There's a cedar tree between there, and it's standing at the side elevation of 1 to 6 Lakeside. This other view at photograph 8 is the front edge taken at an angle looking towards the rear of the garage block. That's number 8. And photograph 9 is showing it from the other side of the hall, glimpsing through from the back edge at an angle to the rear. The first building you can see nearest to the trees, the back of the garages, and then in between that building and the hall is the roof of the office. Photograph 10 denotes a wider picture to get into context of how all the building heights relate to one another. You can see there's the hall to the left, the office building garages sitting in the middle and lakeside flats to the right. Here we have it's standing in the back of the garage courts at the back of the office building, photograph 11, looking towards the two-storey element of the hall, and then turning right round, looking back towards from the hall into the garage court. You can see the garage buildings are either side, and to the back of that is the roof of the office. That photograph 13 denotes that part of the garage that would be altered by these proposals. Photograph 14 denotes the nearest dwelling opposite the site. And looking to the south of the site, it's right away down to the south. Photograph 15 denotes the orangery and the four-storey apartment blocks. Here we have some pictures that have been supplied by an objector, which were prior agreed after we did the report and agenda. We got a request to include these and they've been approved. It's shown the rhododendron bush, photograph 17 in full bloom, where the garage block would be erected. Inside, it would cut into the inside edge of that bush of rhododendrons. And photograph 18 shows the full picture of the hall with the fountain setting to the fore. Photograph 19 is the fountain. These pictures here have been supplied by the agent, and it's to give more of an illustrative impression of how all the buildings would sit in relation to one another. And this is a colour picture just to give you an idea of, you can see the garage block where it cuts into the rhododendrons there and how they all sit in relation to each other. But a large part of this hard standing at the front would be given over to soft landscaping, and there would be a hedge along that hard top right portion of the site, a yew hedge, a mature one to be installed as part of the proposals. And here we have another artist impression of how the building would look. So here are the submitted plans. This is the garage that would be amended and cut into by the proposals. Here we have a layout of the proposals showing there is a basement, there's a ground floor, a first floor with 4 bedrooms and a second floor with another bedroom. There are 2 balconies either side of the 2 side elevations. Here's the elevations showing the full proposal, how it would look in relation to the garages. So there have been a number of changes since this has been submitted. The building has been reduced in height by 2.1 metres from the original submitted design and has been reduced in footprint by 16%. The height of the dwelling would be 11.6 metres and the height of the garages would be 5 metres. The nearest habitable room windows are located at a minimum of 31 metres measured from the flats at Lakeside, which are the nearest residential dwellings. The elevations have been altered to also incorporate a pitched roof design, and the elevations are flat fronted. The second floor roof terraces are located to the side elevations and are set back from the principal elevation of the dwelling. Competing elements of the original designs have been removed to improve relationships with the hall. Originally proposed car lift has been removed from the scheme, and an alternative above ground location was agreed for a garage to be located within the dense rhododendron shrub group located at the front of the site. A single storey rear wing has also been omitted. A comprehensive tree survey has been submitted to support the revised scheme. The survey confirms the removal of 5 category C trees. However, all other trees are to be retained. The revised proposal reuses the existing car stand into the front of the site with a no deconstruction path linking this to the entrance of the house. all other areas of hard standing are proposed to revert to soft landscaping. A number of internal changes have been made to ensure windows to habitable rooms are not close to canopies of mature adjacent trees. The revised design would comprise a Parex render sand yellow colour to the elevation instead of a white render for the original submitted design. However, a condition has been recommended for approval by the Council's Conservation Officer. This planning application is being reported to the Planning Committee due to a calling request from Councillor Joseph Powell. The calling request was provided in response to the original scheme and is summarised as follows. Design of the house breaches height and massing characteristics of a long established settled area. Proposed materials for the house are unsympathetic to the area. The proposal would appear out of keeping with the character of the area. The Shenstone Parish Council also raised significant objections on the grounds of conflict with key neighbourhood plan policies regarding to infill development and overall scale, mass and design of the proposal. The Parish Council are also concerned that mature trees of significance remain at risk due to the extensive subterranean works identified. There's been a supplementary report prepared. As part of this, I'll bring to your attention that the plan number condition has got to be amended for the location plan number to read number 211001, revision B, received October 2021. That indicates the portion of the garage that would be altered as part of the scheme, which all the drawings indicate. Also, there was additional information received from a local resident. The information included 3 photographs showing the listed house, rhododendrons and fountain, which have been shown to you. 2 plans showing an alternative scheme and a photograph purporting to give visualisation of the dwelling in the context of the listed building. The information has been uploaded to the Council's online planning website and is available for inspection on public access. The photographs have been included in the committee presentation, however, the other information has not been included as they did not show an accurate representation and it was an alternative scheme that we couldn't verify in terms of its accuracy. And the point that was made in that document was that the rhododendrons are not protected by a preservation order and they could be removed without permission. Furthermore, it's also been confirmed some areas of the group of rhododendrons have suffered disease in the past and therefore they may not form a permanent feature in the landscape setting. Increased soft landscaping is proposed by the scheme, which would provide a net gain in terms of landscaping and biodiversity.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you very much. Right, well, thank you very much to Audrey there. Members, we now have 2 speakers. The first of whom is the objector, is Mr. John Ames. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, sir. Mr. John Ames is the objector, perhaps representing quite a lot of the people at the back of this chamber, I would imagine. Mr. Ames, the protocol here is that you have 5 minutes. Your time will start as soon as you start your presentation, and with 30 seconds still to go, on my left, the clerk here will alert you to the fact that you only have 30 seconds. And at the end of the full 5 minutes, if you are still speaking, you must stop immediately that the 5 minutes has elapsed. So the time will start as soon as you begin. Thank you.
Good evening. Core Policy 14 requires that the heritage assets and their setting be given the highest priority when considering planning applications, and any new development must have a positive impact on the asset and its setting. The domineering 9-metre high 3-storey house and large garage will block some public views of the hall, and the conspicuous all-over painted rendering is not sympathetic to the hall or to neighbouring properties. The design is therefore contrary to Core Policy 14 and does not comply with Policy HSG1 of the Neighbourhood Plan that requires any development to reinforce the uniformity of the road by reflecting the scale, mass, height and form of its neighbours. High-level terraces. The client brief called for an entertaining room with views to the hall, and original plans showed a sitting stroke entertaining room and bar area on the third floor, leading to the larger of the two outside terraces. In latest plans, the bar is no longer shown and the entertaining text removed. I suggest this is nothing more than a cosmetic change to avoid objections prior to planning approval. No houses in Lakeside have high level terraces, and hence the proposal does not meet the uniformity requirements of policy HSG1. The small 4 square metre balconies of the apartment blocks cited as a precedent are screened from Lakeside houses and are a considerable distance from Hall apartments. They are unsuitable for entertaining purposes, being minuscule in comparison to the massive 35 square metre combined area of the proposed terraces. Furthermore, LDC pre-planning advice clearly stated that the apartment blocks cannot be cited as a precedent, as they predate the Little Aston Conservation Designation date of 1999. The planning assessment also fails to acknowledge that trees will not prevent the terraces from overlooking the Hall apartments and will only partly limit overlooking of houses during summer months. The extremely large terraces are a potential noise nuisance and will infringe on the privacy of neighbours. They will also create a new, very undesirable planning precedent for any future redevelopment in Lakeside. New boundary fence. Houses in Lakeside have an established open plan arrangement with no boundary walls, fences or hedges on road frontages, creating a pleasant open landscape amenity. The proposed 1.8 metre high fence and hedge close to the road fails to meet the requirement of policy HSG1, as it does not reflect the character of the surrounding area or protect the amenity of its neighbours. Garage block. The very large 10 metre by 6 metre by 5 metre high garage greatly overlaps the much loved rhododendron bushes. This will result in damage to their central stems and expose the hideous 10 metre wide rear garage wall that will adversely affect the setting of the hall. Alternative screening plans should be submitted prior to approval, rather than relying on the very generalised increase in soft planting requirements currently proposed. Road access. There is no parking allowed on the very narrow roads of the estate, as it would block resident access. The development plot is densely populated with protected trees, and once excavation begins, most parking space will be lost. Although a plan to prevent parking on the road is required prior to approval, I would argue the sheer mass of the proposed buildings and tree density of the plot means there will be insufficient parking space available, and consequently construction traffic will park on the road and block resident access. Construction times. Lakeside is a peaceful, tranquil location, and any construction noise will be considerably above ambient levels. Most residents are retired and at home during the day. Therefore, accepted practice on the estate is that such work is restricted to 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Monday to Friday and 8:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Saturdays. I therefore request the construction time restriction proposed be amended accordingly. To conclude, a very large number of residents and the parish council have strongly objected to a building of this size and design in this location. We do not believe LDC planning should be supporting it and urge the committee not to approve the application in its present form. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Thank you. No, please. We certainly do not encourage applause, but thank you very much. Mr. Ames, thank you very much for that. We now have the applicant's agent, and this is Mr. Guy Poole. Mr. Poole, you will be familiar with the protocol, having listened to it once. I won't repeat it, but you have 5 minutes when you start. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of my client in support of this application. My name is Guy Poole from Swan Architects. I am a chartered architect for this proposal. As a firm, we specialise in bespoke residential projects in conservation areas, including Four Oaks Park and Aston Park, often on very challenging sites. From the outset, we recognise the importance and sensitivity of the application sites. We engaged with the local authority from the beginning, starting with pre-application advice, which confirmed that the principle of development was acceptable. This engagement has continued over time before the final design was arrived at. Firstly, we would like to thank both planning case officers, the conservation officer and the principal arboricultural officer for their continued help and advice, which we believe has greatly enhanced the design of the house. The final design has been reduced in height and footprint from earlier schemes. It enables all the trees in the site to be retained, with the exception of poor quality category C trees, due to the careful positioning of the house. The appearance of the house is subtle, with sandstone coloured rendered walls under a natural slate roof. We intend to continue working with the conservation officer on the fine architectural detailing that will be needed to deliver a building of architectural quality. The case officer has addressed the concerns of the remaining objectors in the comprehensive planning report. To reiterate, we note that the remaining objections to the revised design appear in the main to concern the top floor roof terraces, the effect of the garage building on the rhododendron group to the front of the site, the height of the house, the boundary treatment of the rear garden, the proposed colour of the house, some questions regarding our historical research and the method of construction. To take each in turn. The top floor of the house is intended for my client's older parents when they visit, forming a self-contained suite served by a lift for ease of mobility. The majority of flats on the estate benefit from balconies and terraces to enjoy the attractive parkland setting. We see no reason why my client's parents should be denied the same enjoyment. As noted by the case officer, the proposed rear terrace is a considerable distance away from the surrounding balconies and will not affect the privacy of neighbouring residents. The front terrace does not face any buildings. We have discussed and met with the tree officer on site to assess the impact of the garage on the rhododendron group, who confirmed that the shrub is fast growing and invasive and it would very quickly re-establish itself. The height of the house has been reduced by 2.1 metres. The ridge height is some 0.8 metres higher than the nearest house on Lakeside. It is 1.2 metres lower than the nearest block of flats and some 3.1 metres lower than the nearest wing of Little Aston Hall. We have designed the height of the house to give a comfortable transition between all of these buildings. The rear garden has a proposed yew hedge boundary to Lakeside and an open estate rail boundary to the grounds of the hall. The hedge plants are to be mature, giving an instant evergreen screen, protecting the privacy of my client's family. The proposed colour of the rendered walls has been changed in response to local residents' concerns from a white to a sand yellow colour, which will soften the appearance of the house as it's glimpsed through the retained trees. This colour will also complement the colour of the stone of the hall. We have undertaken detailed historical research of the hall through all of its remodelling over time. This gives evidence that there was a service wing to the hall on the application site, as would be expected, no doubt housing kitchens, food stores, laundries, all of the ancillary services to cater to the owners of the hall. Early drawings of this wing show a building at least 2 stories in height with a footprint on the application site projecting slightly forward in the front face of the hall. This wing will undoubtedly change over time, but the historical precedent of the building of considerable size on this site remains. To construct a house of this size and calibre, we know the limited number of specialist contractors capable of delivering the design quality and craftsmanship required, together with experience in managing a detailed construction programme. All are experienced in providing a construction method plan prior to any start on site and would liaise with local residents to inform them of key dates throughout the build programme. Given the amount of work from all parties involved with this application, it is our sincere wish that the committee grant planning approval for this application. Thank you.
Mr. Poole, thank you very much indeed. So I'd like to thank both Mr. Poole and Mr. Ames there for their submission. Both of whom fitted them in very nicely to the 5 minutes that you were allowed. So members, you've heard the report being described by Planning Officer Audrey Lewis, and you've heard the objector, and you've also heard the applicant's agent. Do I have any members who have questions or comments they would like to make, please? If so, please raise your hands. I would, thank you. I'll come on to you in a second then, Councillor Baker. Could I just ask a question to the planning officer, please? The point was made by Mr. Poole that the yew hedge, 1.8 metres high, I think it is designed to give privacy to the eventual occupants were it to be given planning permission. Does that need for privacy trump the directive that the site is supposed to be without such boundaries, and it's meant to be an open site? I'm just wondering where the right to privacy falls in terms of its whether it's subservient or dominant in terms of the need to remain openness on this site. If I could just ask that question, please, of Audrey Lewis. Thank you.
That, I believe, is a covenant on the deeds to the property, so it's separate to planning. And the hedge would be positioned in front of the open railings. A hedge could be planted without the need for planning permission, which would enclose the site.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. So, although there is a directive that we shouldn't have hedges on this site, it is perfectly acceptable to do so. Is that correct? I don't know whether perhaps the legal officer wishes to come in here at all. Jane, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The covenants which you say are protecting over the landscaping and require prohibit fences or hedges, that's a private matter and it's and it relates to the deeds of the site, and it's not really a planning consideration. It's not something the private rights of the different owners of the farm to enforce that covenant are not something that the community members should have regard to. Obviously, the landscaping, the visual amenity, residential criticism, those are all planning matters which should have regard, but the enforceability of the covenant itself is not something you can have regard to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To the legal officer. Councillor Baker, you wish to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of questions or observations. I haven't seen anyone else put hands up yet, so I'll work through those. But if someone else puts a hand up, please, Chairman, stop me and let someone else jump in.
Thank you.
Right. The first thing I was really pleased to see, we've got our tree protection orders in there and the landscaping. And if I understand correctly from the officer, there are use valuable and tree protection zones put in during any construction, including any basement. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Right, thank you. My next question observation that has been mentioned by many people is about the pallet. And my understanding is, from what I've heard from the applicant and what I've read in the report, that we now have a new pallet which our conservation officer has considered to be appropriate for that conservation area. Have I understood that correctly?
That is correct. However, there's a condition for submission of all external materials, which would be subject to a discharge of conditions application if this were to be approved. And those materials proposed to discharge that condition would be consulted on with the conservation officer, so that we've got materials for the whole of the site, every part of the site, paving and materials of the building, etc.
But thank you. I was going to say, would the conservation officer be involved in that? I'm pleased that they will be. Soft landscaping I'm happy with, as everyone knows I'm a bit of an eco warrior anyway, so that's fine. I notice that PDRs are removed, so no further development can happen on that site. And I think the only other question, which is more detailed, which is why I've saved it till last, was just so we can understand better these terraces, their size and potential to condition their treatment in terms of obscured glass or the type of balustrades that will be used to ensure privacy for future residents or the existing estate and sites, but also should this be approved. I think that we could just we're looking at that in a little bit more detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baker. Audrey, then, please. Thank you. If you'd like to just address that point.
The distance away from the nearest properties is 31 metres, so we have not used such a condition on this report and list of conditions attached to it. However, if members so felt that that was necessary, it could be added with the applicant's agreement.
In terms of obscure glass, I mean, my own view probably would be that the distances involved, it probably wouldn't be totally appropriate to have obscure glass with those distances, but I will be guided by others if they so wish. Councillor Matthews, please. Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Chair. Picking up some of the comments that were made by the objector, particularly with relation to nuisance. I've looked at environmental health comments, and the objector's talking about possible amendments to the hours of operation. I'm looking at the suggested condition, 7:30 till 7, Monday to Friday, 8 till 1, Saturday, no Sunday or bank holidays. Is there any indication as to what amendment the objectors were looking for? And following on from that, in terms of nuisance, when it's occupied, there was reference to the balconies and possible nuisance from those. Any comments from officers on that respect from that? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Matthews. Yeah, I think your point was that is there any indication from objectors, etc., what they consider would be reasonable? I've got a feeling actually the gentleman did suggest 8:30 till 5:30. Would I be correct there? I think I heard that correctly anyway. So that seems to be, yes, thank you, yes, and 8:30 to 12, and nothing on Sundays, of course, yeah. That seems to be, I might say, a not unreasonable request, I suppose it could be said. If there were to be a condition on times, do members feel as though that would be appropriate then? Do they feel as though the times that's actually allocated at the moment, 7:30 till 7 during weekdays, is perhaps too generous? Councillor Anketel, please.
Thank you, Chair. If the hours were shortened, the nuisance would last a longer time. So I think it's a balance. I might be inclined to leave the hours as present.
Let me just, yes, I'll come on to both of you in a second, thank you. I think you said if the hours were shortened, the nuisance would be increased, is that correct? Sorry.
If there's less working hours every day, you will take the construction goes will take longer.
Okay, I mean, I suppose that's not an unreasonable assertion. So we need to take that into consideration if we were to consider shortening the working hours. Audrey, did you want to come back on that? If we were to shorten the working hours, would that be considered inappropriate in terms of the fact it may well lengthen the process of building, which is the point that's been made by Councillor Anketel. Yeah, Mrs. Billings, please. Billings.
Sorry, if I could speak, please. Obviously, we have a condition recommended at condition 11 about the working hours here. They are standard practice working hours for construction sites. And in planning terms, it's deemed to be acceptable in terms of those hours. I believe the speaker and local objectors have raised the issue about, again, a covenant matter, it appears, in terms of other works and constructions that take place. And that is outside of the control of planning. In planning terms, it's considered reasonable as per set out on condition 11. We can't comment on yet. There is the potential, as you say, and other members have highlighted, there is the potential that imaging the hours of work, and we have no control necessarily about those end times. I think, you know, if there's concerns in terms of the early hours at the moment, you've got it at 7:30 start times. If members considered that maybe there's an hour in terms of the early mornings, then that might be something appropriate if there is particular harm identified here to justify that.
Thank you very much indeed. I've got a feeling that these elongated hours were brought in where there's a reaction to COVID, recovering from COVID, I thought, at some point. No? Okay. Okay. Members, you've heard what's been suggested there, whether we did perhaps slightly restrict the working hours. Councillor Cross, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've just checked these details up on the internet and it's confirmed what I thought, because I've been in the building industry all my working life. The working hours in the construction industry at the moment is 7:30 to 16:30. But most are working from 8 to 1800 and 8 to 1 p.m. on Saturday. Now, you're correct, it was amended during COVID, and it is always amended during winter because the hours are shorter in the winter, so the Saturday working is usually extended a little. But currently, the working hours is 8 to 1800. Bearing in mind that most workers on the construction sites arrive at 7:30, unload the tools from the vans, and actually start work at 8 o'clock, and they normally finish at 4:30, which gives them their 45 hours per working week. So these hours here is far in excess of what any building worker would want to work anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Cross, just remind me as well, the working hours on a Saturday that you're suggesting.
The working hours, according to the construction working rule agreement, is 8 till 1 p.m.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm very grateful for that information because I think that gives us a fairly well-informed perspective on that. Members, if we just look at that condition then, if we were to say that working hours should be from perhaps 8 until 1800 hours, which is 6 o'clock maximum, and then 8 till perhaps, Councillor Baker, are you?
The condition 11 does already say 8 till 1 p.m. on Saturdays and at no time on Sundays, bank or public holidays.
So it's just the weekdays that we're looking at, isn't it? From 800 hours until 1800 hours, which is 6 o'clock. Do you feel as though that's a reasonable amendment to make?
Yes.
Councillor Baker, you're looking slightly quizzical.
I'm getting really confused here, and I thought the conditions we have it in our documents are the conditions that we work to at this LPA, unless there are special circumstances. Pleased to see the Saturday from 8 o'clock, not 7:30, as we all misread.
Okay, I think I was basing it on Councillor Cross's assertion. He has obviously knowledge of the industry, and it just was more accommodating, I think, of the wishes of the local people who seem to think that those hours are likely to cause more disturbance. Members, are you happy to leave the condition as it is at the moment? Can I just have a show of hands, please, if you're happy to leave that condition as it is at the moment, or whether you think it should be amended? One, just keep your hands up, please, if you would. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you want it amended to the hours suggested by Councillor Cross. Okay, we're going to leave those hours as they are at the moment then, thank you. Sorry for any confusion there. But I was just mindful of the fact that obviously the residents of this area did have some misgivings. I was just trying to be a little bit accommodating in that respect. Okay, Councillor Evans, I believe. Oh, sorry, we'll have the legal officer first, then Councillor Evans, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just one thing, because I'm looking at the meeting Saturday there, what the Chair was asking for was the mood of the meeting, the consensus of the meeting on the timing of those conditions. So, the Chair's, so that clearly indicated, but there has been no formal votes, that they're happy to leave the condition timings as they are. Is that right, Chair?
Correct. That's my interpretation. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I was just trying to gauge the mood of the members, to be honest with you on that. Okay, Councillor Evans, and then it's going to be Councillor Humphreys, please.
Chairman, I just wanted to ask an explanation really about the parking spaces, because we're told that there's 7 to 8 double bedrooms, and the parking spaces have gone from 2 to 3. And does that mean the triple garage? Because I also note, although we've just been told about covenants, that there is a covenant on to restrict outside parking. And I just wonder what the interpretation is of outside parking. Is it outside the site or is it?
Thank you very much, councillor Evans. Audrey Lewis, please.
Outside parking is outside of the building, the structure, the garage. That would be classed as outside parking. The parking requirements for this conforms with the parking standards for the council, which where it's above a 4-bedroom dwelling, it requires 3 parking spaces. They are accommodated in the triple garage. It is actually a proposal for 5 bedrooms. This is a 5-bedroom. It was amended down from, I think, 7 or 8 bedrooms, but it currently stands as 5 bedrooms.
Thank you very much, councillor. Is that okay, councillor Evans? Okay. I think some people often raise their eyebrows at the parking standards, but county council and the county highways are the ones who do this. The essence of the argument is that by effectively having fewer parking spaces, they deter people from using their cars and private transport. I am yet to be convinced that that is necessarily the case. We now have councillor Humphreys, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Sad to say, I've known this site for an awful long time. More than 70 years ago, a group of Rotarian Exchange in Australia were entertained there, and I was part of the group. I've known it for more than 70 years. My sister worked when it was ESSO, and it was all open space. The whole of this site was a whole open space. It has been built on, and it is one more house is not going to make an iota difference. And I would propose that.
No, quiet, please. We're very happy to have lots of people here expressing an interest in this, but we do not allow any participation at all. Thank you for your comments, but we do not allow that. Thank you.
I mean,
councillor Humphreys.
Like motorways were in somebody's back garden at some point. All these housing have been built, and I would propose that we accept the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. So you're formally suggesting approval, aren't you? You're recommending approval. Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Anne Patel. Okay. Yes, the legal officer, please.
Just to check before you that based on conditions in the report, did the plan officer have a member condition in relation to plan reference, or is that covered in the report?
The list of approved documents, there was an amended location plan received, which is plan number, it's for location plan, as I said, 211001, revision B, received October 2021.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So are we happy with that then, please? Thank you very much indeed.
That's an amendment.
Okay. Thank you, thank you. In terms of the amount of documentation for this application, I did note the fact that there were nearly 100, I think there were 99 references, different reports that came in. The bulk of those, I think, were from objectors as well. So I do understand there is an awful lot of feeling, if you like, opposing this application. So that is fairly obvious from the number of objectors. I think 42 objectors wrote over 60 letters of objection. Okay, are there any more points, members, that you wish to make? This is obviously one which is has been highlighted by quite a few members. Any more members, please? Okay, I think in that case then, we've had the report from Audrey Lewis. Members, you've all had your opportunity to ask questions and make comments. There is nothing more for me to do than to ask for this to go to the vote. It has been recommended for approval by Councillor Humphreys, and it's been seconded by Councillor Anne Cattell. Members, could I please have a show of hands of those of you who wish to go along with the officer's recommendation, which is to approve this application, please? Please raise your hands. Is that 8? That's 8. Could I have those who wish to vote against that proposal, please? And that is 2. Okay, members, this application, which is 21/01661/FUL, has been passed by this planning committee. And I thank you very much for your deliberations and your time. Thank you. I realise there are quite a lot of people in attendance. So, once again, good evening, everyone. We now resume this meeting, this planning committee meeting here at Lichfield. The time is 6:55, and we move on to the second item on this agenda, which is 22/00932/FUH. This is 17 Trafalgar Way, Lichfield, and this is coming before you at planning committee due to a call-in by the ward councillor, Councillor Spruce, who is here with us this evening. And it's very nice to see you here as well, Councillor Spruce. Thank you for being in attendance. I will now ask the planning officer responsible for this application, which is Mr. Richard Sunter. Richard Sunter is going to take you through this one at 17 Trafalgar Way, Lichfield. Richard, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening to the ladies and gentlemen of Planning Committee. The application before you is for a single-storey side and rear extension to form an entrance hall and living room at number 17 Trafalgar Way, Lichfield. On the screen before you is a location plan showing the application site outlined in red. It's in a residential area, and it seems to me, although I've been in Lichfield long, that it's a more recent form of development. These are an aerial photograph, again showing the layout of the site and its relationship to those properties that surround it. It is a semi-detached house. One could almost call it a terrace, but I'd call it a linked semi-detached because it's a semi-detached on one side and it has that first floor link that links into the property at number 19. Underneath that first floor link, there is a garage, garage court or carport, whatever, undercroft, whichever you may call it, which gives parking for vehicles. You can also see on the photograph number 2, that's the rear. So that's where the extension is proposed to be. The property is separated from the property that shares the link by a 2-metre high wooden fence. Again, in photographs 3 and 4, you can see that detail of the fence, and you can see the neighbour's extension above that. You can also see a conifer tree, which has been mentioned in the report, and as you can see, it can't be really seen from the public highway and has got very, very limited amenity value in it. This shows the site with the extension, proposed extension in the light blue. And I would sit within the site and also the amount of amenity space that would surround it should it be approved and built. This is the elevations as is. And this is the elevations as proposed. And you can see that in terms of its height and scale, that it would be 2.6 metres to the eaves. It will be 3.6 metres to the apex of the roof. It extends to the rear by 7.5 metres and will be 4.8 metres wide. In terms of the leftover outdoor amenity space, that would be 47 square metres, which is 18 square metres less than 65 square metres that the design guide sets out for properties of 3-bedroom properties. Again, here you can see the internal layout of the proposed extension. You also see that it's actually set in from the fence that divides the 2 properties. Probably a very small detail. I'm not sure whether you can actually see it here, but there is provision for a downpipe that could be accessed by whoever needs to maintain that. I only mention that because that's one of the issues that's been raised by one of the objectors.
Here it shows the relationship between the extension and the 45-degree line, which we use to indicate whether or not a neighbouring property to the side would be adversely affected in terms of light, and whether that adverse effect would be significant enough to warrant refusal. As you can see, it doesn't cut that 45-degree line, and in terms of light to that property, it is considered in planning terms to be acceptable. That ends the presentation, Chair, and back to yourselves. The recommendation is for approval. The details of the objections made by the neighbour are also given in your report, with officers' response to those issues that have been raised. Thank you very much for listening.
And Richard, thank you very much indeed for that. Members, there you are. You heard a very instructive analysis there, and concise analysis, yes, of that report. There is a point, of course, which I don't, did you mention the party wall? I think you did mention the party wall, but I know that that's not actually a planning consideration, but it does form, it is mentioned in the report, isn't it, Richard?
It is mentioned in the report because that was one of the issues that's been raised by the neighbour who has concerns about the party wall. But as you're correct, same Chair, that is under separate legislation, is something outside of the planning system to adjudicate on. There's also an issue of foundations, Chair, which has been raised and whether they're acceptable. But again, that's a matter for building control. So it's for the building control authority to determine whether foundations are acceptable or not.
Okay,
and again, not the planning authority.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that clarification. So in the last application, of course, we had the complex matter of covenants, and now we've got the fact you've got party walls, but that is not a planning consideration, so that cannot colour your judgment, members, at all. Do we have questions at all, comments that people would like to make? Sorry. No, yes, Councillor Baker, please.
In the absence of no other hands. I can see now the officers pointed out that there is space for access to downpipes, etc., which I know was a concern of the neighbour, and I understand that. Because I believe number 19 also has an extension which is smaller in size so than this one. Could you give me an understanding of the relative heights of the two, if you know? I think you've got a picture somewhere.
I haven't got exact details other than photographs.
Yeah, could we have a look at that?
Again, just have a look at there on the bottom, you can actually see the height of the proposed one. Looking then at the photographs in turn, so you can see that again, it's a similar sort of height that the apex of the roof really touches that third floor window.
Yeah.
And then comparing that with the proposed photograph, it looks like it might be slightly smaller, but it's difficult to judge. But they're very much a similar sort of height.
Thank you. And the other thing I noticed, I've been a bit on balance, which is the resulting amenity space, i.e. the garden. Given that situation, would it be appropriate to apply the removal of PDRs just in case?
The balanced decision. I think it probably would be unnecessary to do that, but I could see some benefits of doing so. Under the permit development rights for curtilage buildings, you can develop up to 50% of the garden area, which will be separate from the extensions as well. It's a matter of judgment. Ultimately, I don't think it's necessary to do so, and conditions should only be applied where it is necessary to do so.
Okay. And then one final question, it was the access to the proposed extension, which I believe is coming off the parking area.
That is correct through you, Chair.
And again, does that meet appropriate protocols? I know some is perhaps building regs, but it is a parking area.
It is a parking area, I agree. There's no particular policy that would control that from a planning point of view. It's a personal aspect of whether they wish to have that arrangement. But just for comparison, just to show you on that, compared to the photographs that we have. Now you can actually see that under the undercraft here, the fence that goes down and separates the two gardens, actually dog legs at the underpass of where this extension would be. And there's a gate and a fence there already that allows the access in and out. Won't be much different in arrangement to that.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. In fact, your second point really about the amenity space was one that was on my list as well. And I suppose in a way we mentioned permitted development rights and the fact that you can develop up to 50% of the garden curtilage, etc., you know, within the curtilage. I suppose they're almost conflicting in a way, aren't they? Because I mean, you're left with 36 square meters here. So if somebody were to say that they wanted to exercise their permitted development, they could say that they could develop half of that 36 square meters. But of course, that would fall foul of our amenity space, wouldn't it? So in a way, I appreciate what you're saying about permitted development, but it would almost be superfluous because there's so little garden there to develop that you probably wouldn't be able to do anything anyway, I wouldn't have thought. I'm just wondering, Richard, the very fact that the amenity space is well below our recommended levels, and I know it's only recommended, it's not mandatory. Does that cause us any problems at all, or are we quite happy to ride with that one?
It certainly doesn't give me any problems as an officer recommending approval to you. When I've looked at appeal decisions before, in fact, I was looking at one this morning and I sort of raised an eyebrow because it was a fairly similar situation to this, where the proposal ate into and gave what we would, for a new dwelling, considered to be a substandard amount of amenity space. And yet the inspector said there was still sufficient to hang out your clothing and for a child to play in the garden. And therefore he accepted that was acceptable. Yeah, and one of the things that I said in the report that we routinely put or approve estates where they meet our standards, and every authority I've been to has been fairly similar, where they approve developments which just meet our standards and yet do not routinely take off permitted development. It is one of those conundrums, and it is a balanced decision. But given the appeal decisions, I would suggest that that's not used as a reason for refusal.
Okay, I think what it does demonstrate, members, is the scope for interpretation there is within planning law. I think we'd all agree, wouldn't we, really, that it's a very, very, in many ways, a very subjective field when all's said and done. Thank you very much, Richard, for answering those questions. Do we have any other points or questions, please, members? Councillor Salter, please.
Thank you. There we go. Yeah, staying with that amenity area, it's clarification for my own benefit, really, although I already know this. Are you saying that you can develop up to 50% of the curtilage, provided what remains is within the guides?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily the case, no. We grant, and maybe Claire will corroborate this, it has been the case in Lichfield. But all authorities that I work for, we have minimum or standards for amenity space per houses of a certain size, usually based on numbers of bedrooms. And that when we approve those, it's in the knowledge that there will be permitted development rights, that we could take those permitted development rights off, but it is not done as a matter of course. Okay. And therefore, in a lot of properties, you will find that there has been erosion of the amount of amenity space for other things, for example, garden sheds and greenhouses, which are quite often used to enjoy that amenity space to the full.
Councillor Soldier, I have got the standards here just very quickly. It should be a minimum of 10 metres in length, and 2 bedrooms or less is 45 square metres, 3 and 4 bedrooms 65 square metres, and 5 or more bedrooms 100 square metres. So those are what is, if you like, ideal or is aspirational. Whether it's achieved every time is a moot point, of course. Councillor Cross, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Spruce called us in. Are we going to give him an opportunity to speak?
I'm afraid, as much as I respect Councillor Spruce enormously, and I would love him to be able to speak, he hasn't declared a wish to do so. And Lisa, I don't think you have you, Councillor Spruce? Just very quickly, if you could just answer that.
No, thank you, Chair. Can I just say I called it in?
Yes.
Because the next door neighbour was very, very irate.
Indeed. Thank you.
Demanding me what, once the officer's report came through, I did not wish to speak in any form of abuse.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Spruce. I very much appreciate that explanation. Thank you. So there you have it, members. Councillor Spruce is here, but he's not speaking. Thank you. Any other members, please, wish to pass comment, ask a question? This is a little bit more straightforward, I think, than the one that we deliberated over for an hour earlier. Members, the officer's recommendation is to approve this application. I don't think we've had anyone proposing approval and seconding, but in the absence of anyone doing that, could I ask, please, the officer's recommendation is to approve. Can I please have a show of hands for those? I'm sorry. Okay, could we have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Humphreys is proposing, Councillor Cross is seconding. Thank you. So Councillor Humphreys, thank you for that. Councillor Cross, thank you. Okay, members, there you are then. Councillor Humphreys proposing, Councillor Cross seconding. Can I please have a show of hands for those of you wishing to agree with the officer's recommendation to approve this application? Thank you. I think that is NEMCON. It's NEMCON. Thank you. That is all 10 members present have voted in favour of approval. Thank you. Members and members of the public, fellow councillors who don't happen to be sitting on the planning committee, all the officers here this evening, thank you very much indeed for your contributions. The time is 12 minutes past 7, and members, I declare this meeting of the planning committee here at Lichfield closed at that time. I look forward to seeing you in 4 weeks' time at the planning committee, which will be held here in October. Thank you very much. And to those of you watching online, thank you very much for attending. And we're now going to sign off, and the coverage, the online coverage, will now cease. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance, and good night. Thank you.